Welcome to US Secret Agenda channel. The Baltic countries in Europe are now taking very drastic measures against Russia and going very hard against it. The first phase of the Russian invasion of Ukraine ended earlier this month, and Russian officials have admitted that they have failed in Ukraine. However, this was more of a sign that Phase 2 was going to be much harder than a statement of withdrawal. In the second stage, Russia intensified its army movements in the region again. Especially in the east of Ukraine, Russian forces began to gather. It is reported that the Russian army has increased in the Donbas region. The great loss in the north of the country pushed Russia to a new war strategy. Having entered conflict in the north, south and east of Ukraine, Russia realized that this was not a viable strategy. For this reason, Russia directed its forces to the city of Izium. A few days ago, Izium was occupied by the Russian army. Also, the movements of the Russian army in Mariupol were observed. The unyielding attitude of the Russian army alarmed the Eastern European and Baltic countries. Thereupon, the USA and European NATO tightened their measures in the Eastern Bloc. NATO's shipments to Eastern Europe have been increasing in recent days. In total, more than 300,000 NATO troops were deployed on the Russian-Ukrainian border. In particular, around 150,000 NATO soldiers have been deployed to the Polish border, and it is aimed to prevent possible Russian attacks. On the other hand, Russia demands that Ukraine be disarmed, NATO return to the way it was in 1997, and Finland and Sweden definitely not join NATO. These requests of Russia are seen as unacceptable by NATO. One of Russia's and especially Vladimir Putin's biggest nightmares is the admission of Finland or Sweden to NATO. However, Russia's harsh preparation for Phase 2 of the invasion of Ukraine and its potential to plunge Europe into an irreversible mess forces the Baltic states to use their biggest trump card against Russia. Today, while the possibility of Finland and Sweden joining NATO is more real than ever, it is becoming Russia's nightmare and has created an earthquake effect on the world agenda. It remains a matter of curiosity how Russia will react to the move of Russia's border neighbors Finland and Sweden. What Russia put forward as the main reason for invading Ukraine was the possibility that Ukraine would join NATO. At least Russian President Vladimir Putin offered that excuse. Finland and Sweden could soon join NATO, moves that would likely infuriate Moscow and that officials say would further underscore Russia's strategic error in invading Ukraine. Now, serious consideration of Finland and Sweden's application to NATO could completely change the balance in the region. NATO officials told that discussions about Sweden and Finland joining the bloc have gotten extremely serious since Russia's invasion, and US senior State Department officials said the matter came up at this week's NATO Foreign Ministerial, which was attended by the foreign ministers from Stockholm and Helsinki. Officials said the discussions underline the extent to which Vladimir Putin's invasion has only served to reinvigorate and unify the NATO alliance, the exact opposite of Putin's stated goals before the war began. The Russian president had demanded that NATO cease expanding east and admitting new members, accusing the bloc of threatening Russian security. Instead, NATO has increased its support to Ukraine and is preparing to welcome new members. According to opinion polls, most Finns currently support Finland's NATO membership. Finland will refine the next steps in the coming weeks regarding a possible NATO membership decision, Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto told reporters after attending a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels on Thursday. Referring to NATO, Haavisto said, "We have come to a situation where we may need cooperation." He added that NATO member countries offered security assistance to Finland during the accession process, and they estimate that it will take about 4 months for the membership applications to be approved. Of course, NATO is wondering if Finland and possibly Sweden will submit their membership applications before then, he said. The foreign minister said the government will present a revised version of the resolution to the Finnish parliament next week. The government is ready to offer rapid accession to NATO if it receives sufficient parliamentary support. If you look at public opinion in Finland and Sweden, and how their views have changed dramatically over the past 6 weeks, I think it's another example of how this has been a strategic failure, one senior US State Department official said this week. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin said Friday that her country's parliament is set to discuss possible NATO membership within the coming weeks, adding that she hopes these discussions will wrap up before midsummer. I think we will have very careful discussions, but we are also not taking any more time than we have to in this process, because the situation is, of course, very severe, she said. Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson did not rule out the possibility of membership in an interview with SVT at the end of March. Sweden is undertaking an analysis of security policy that's due to be completed by the end of May, and the government is expected to announce its position following that report, a Swedish official said. They said their nation could make its position public sooner, depending on when neighboring Finland does. Finland's ambassador to the US, Mikko Hautala, told that the two nations are in close coordination with each other but that each country would make its own independent decision. A Finnish official said Friday that their country would not be seeking to join NATO out of desperation for defense from the 30-member alliance. Rather, Moscow's actions in Ukraine have forced Finland to rethink the fundamentals. And we do understand that our relations with this Russia that now exists, they can't be the same as they used to be due to these Russian actions, the official said. Alexander Stubb, who served as Finland's prime minister in 2014-2015, echoed this sentiment, telling that there had long been a tension in the country between idealism, wanting to be able to work with Russia, with whom it shares a border, and realism, which required Finland to maintain a strong standing army in the event that Russia ever invaded. That idealism has now largely evaporated in the wake of Russia's attack. The Finns think that if Putin can slaughter his sisters, brothers and cousins in Ukraine, as he is doing now, then there is nothing stopping him from doing it in Finland. We simply don't want to be left alone again, Stubb said, recalling the Soviet-Finnish Winter War, which lasted from November 1939 to March 1940. The Kremlin said Thursday it would have to rebalance the situation if Sweden and Finland were to join NATO. We'll have to make our western flank more sophisticated in terms of ensuring our security, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said. Finland was hit with 2 cyber attacks and an airspace violation by a Russian state-owned plane on Friday. Both Stubb and the Finnish official said Helsinki expects such types of attacks, and they downplayed the potential of a severe response from Moscow should Finland, which shares a more than 800-mile border with Russia, join NATO. However, some NATO countries are looking at the possibility of Russia carrying out an attack before Finland falls under the protections of the alliance, according to a European official. We will be very live to the possibility that Russia may try to do something before they join the alliance, the official said. And the Finnish official acknowledged they have to be prepared. If our country will decide to apply or even if they don't, the situation is not safe, stable. We have a war, we have all kinds of possibilities. They said there have been signals from other countries that they would offer support if there were security concerns in the interim between application and ratification of NATO membership. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said this week that, on the interim period, I'm certain that we will find ways to address concerns they may have regarding the period between the potential application and the final ratification. NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg de Bagun Natonon Genilmesil Ilgili as Siklamalarda Bulundu. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said Friday that the 30-member US-led alliance would warmly welcome Finland should the Nordic country apply for membership in light of Russia's war in Ukraine. Finland Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto said Thursday that the country, which shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Russia, would soon clarify the next steps on the possibility that it will apply for NATO membership. Local media outlets have shown Finnish support for NATO membership hitting a record high following Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. The message from NATO and from me is that it is for Finland to decide, Stoltenberg said. The Pentagon said Friday there have been no requests for assistance from either country, but if a country calls and asks for the United States support, certainly we'll take that under consideration. Stoltenberg said that Sweden and Finland can easily join this alliance if they decide to apply, noting they have worked together for many years. We know that they meet the NATO standards when it comes to interoperability, democratic control over the armed forces. The Finnish official noted that their country is essentially already a member without being a member. Privately, NATO and US officials say they would be thrilled to see Finland and Sweden join the bloc. Those countries already have extremely close relationships with NATO and would be a huge asset, NATO officials told that, especially when it comes to intelligence sharing. While the level of intelligence sharing among Finland, Sweden and NATO has increased dramatically since the start of the war, one NATO official said, it is not at the level it would be if the countries were members of the bloc.